that have been used in other contexts, health and financial areas. So why not use them in the environmental sector? And we can get a lot of different outcomes, actually. We can get the environmental outcomes. We can also get an economy with fewer economic distortions. And I should just mention that the other half of the title of my talk, the first half is the power of prices, second half is the failure of markets. Market failure is just a piece of economic jargon to explain why the economy is going to be better off if we start taxing bads and not goods. So I'm not going to get into that, you'll be relieved to know, but it is in those sources that I mentioned earlier. The other thing is we can create green jobs with a program like this. We can diversify the city's revenue streams and hopefully get out of that property tax box a little bit. If we want to adjust prices, let's have a look at a few examples that are relevant to sprawl. So we're going to look at development cost charges, property taxes, and transportation prices. And again, these are just examples. I'm just going to go through them with you to illustrate the way of thinking about these problems and the way of thinking about solutions. So the first one, development cost charges. Wherever somebody builds a new housing subdivision or a new industrial park, there are going to be costs entailed by the city for that development. The city is going to be responsible for roads, it's going to be responsible for certain facilities, policing, ambulances, schools, libraries, et cetera, whenever there's a new area developed. And those costs are going to vary depending on location. So if you've got development going in a greenfield site way out of town, there's going to need to be roads leading to that, there's going to be pipes leading to that, the costs are going to be a bit higher. So what the city doesn't absorb all that. It's not like the taxpayers pay it all without any assistance. The city imposes charges on developers. So development cost charges to help pay for some of those costs. Now in Edmonton, as it turns out, despite the fact that costs vary depending on location, the development cost charges, a lot of them don't vary. They're just based on things like size of house, size of land developed, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be that way though. Development cost charges can be made to vary based on location, size, density, that sort of thing. And it's been done elsewhere. So if we take a look at the city of Kitchener, what they've done, you'll see from this illustration that there are 4 types of development here. From left to right, these are detached and semi-detached houses, townhouses, multiples and duplexes, and lodging houses. And you'll see as you go to the right that the development cost charges go down. So basically there's an added incentive to build denser styles of housing in Kitchener. And then if you look at each of those 4 types of development, you'll see there's 2 different bars there. The blue bar represents the cost for doing it in the city, in the central part of the city. The pink bar represents the cost of doing it out in the suburbs. And you'll see that Kitchener has shaped it so that not only do you pay less per unit for building denser units, you pay less per unit for building them in the center of town as opposed to out on the suburbs. So if you want denser development, do you financially reward it or do you not? I mean, it's pretty simple. Property taxes, next example. So property taxes in most places are, in North America at least, are based on total property value. It's just a percentage of the value. Now, if we look at where properties are valuable and not valuable, out in the suburban fringes, where land is cheap, property is cheaper. So taxes are going to be cheaper using that formula. And so that formula, that tax structure, boosts the incentives to sprawl out there because the taxes are going to be less. And then we have to ask ourselves, do we want that or do we want infill? Okay, so a lot of people believe, and I think City Council supports the idea that we want infill. We want to redevelop the center part of town. We want it to be a more vibrant downtown. So does that property tax structure help? No, it doesn't. So change it. Okay, so we can make taxes lower in central areas compared to the outlying areas. Another example in Edmonton, if you look at different housing types, so single-family dwellings versus multiple family dwellings, what do we want to encourage? Again, we want to encourage density, right? Multifamily dwellings. Does anyone have an idea what our relative tax rates are for single-family dwellings versus multiple? Which one is cheaper? Dawn, you probably know. Single-family is cheaper, so we're giving an incentive, again, towards single-family dwellings, less dense dwellings. Yep, multifamily dwellings are taxed at a rate 15% higher than single-family dwellings. It doesn't have to be that way. We can turn that around, level the playing field, or even tip it in favor of achieving our environmental goals. So we could restructure it so that the denser properties have the financial advantage, or at least the tax advantage. Moving on to a different area, transportation pricing. Again, transportation is very relevant to sprawl. Fuel taxes, another quiz here for you guys. What do fuel taxes in North America cover? Do they cover less than the full cost of roads, or the exact amount of the cost of roads, or the cost of roads plus a whole bunch more? I won't pick on Dawn again, but I think you guys probably know, you can probably guess what they cover. And the answer is it's number one, they cover 60 to 70% of the cost of roads. So the cost of roads are not covered by fuel taxes, and I'm including registration, vehicle registration, and the whole basket of vehicle-related costs do not cover the cost of roads, okay? So we're subsidizing road building, and how are we paying for that? With our property taxes, of course. And of course, because there's not enough money in fuel taxes and motor vehicle taxes to cover the cost of roads, the financial costs, there's certainly not enough to cover the environmental costs of roads. All the crashes, all the emissions, not covered. But we are paying for them. So do we want more vehicle emissions or less? If we want less, then maybe we should raise gas taxes and give the money to municipalities. It's not like those gas tax revenues are going to go down into a black hole and never be seen again. We're going to use them for something, right? So maybe we give them to municipalities so we can offset property taxes. Or maybe the municipalities will use them to build better transit systems. So, calling for fuel, I'm not running for election, so I can call for fuel taxes. Okay, it's never a terribly popular position, but I have the luxury of doing that. Do we have room to raise fuel taxes? Well, if you have a look at the comparison between North American fuel taxes and the rest of the world, so if you combine federal and provincial and look at the rest of the developed world, we've got a lot of room to go up if we want. Road pricing, another example. Right now you can use Edmonton's roads for free. Everybody likes something that's free. So you can drive all through Edmonton from one end to the other, up and down and all around, and never pay anything for the use of those roads. So are roads really actually free? That's a good one. No, of course not. We pay for them through our property taxes, and we pay nicely through our property taxes, a lot, because roads are actually a very big part of the city's overall budget. So property taxes, is that a good way to pay for roads? I mean, there's lots of different ways you could pay for roads. Is that a good way to pay for them? Well, it depends. The answer to that depends. Do we want more cars on the road and more traffic congestion, or do we want less of it? If we want less traffic congestion, then maybe we should pay in a different way. Pay for those roads when the vehicles use them. It's kind of like the difference between paying for food off the menu and going to an all-you-can-eat buffet. Once you've already paid to get into the buffet, you can eat a lot more of it, right? I mean, I just did that this whole weekend. But I don't really want it to happen on our roads. So road pricing. Again, I'm not running for office, so I don't care if I sound unpopular, but it is something we could do, and it's being done in a lot of other places. The City of London, England has a great cordon toll around the center of town. It's raised a lot of money. It encouraged a great reduction in the amount of traffic congestion in the center of town, and people are fairly supportive of it now. You can see Canada here has a total of 344 kilometers of tolled roads. Compare that to, any of those other countries, with the exception of Chile and Hungary. All of them have more than Canada. And I'd point out that the United States has a lot more than Canada. Another area where we could apply pricing is in parking. So here's a letter to the editor from today's Edmonton Journal, and I didn't write this one, but it's just, fella's just pointing out what's obvious. If he has to pay $5 to park downtown just for a little bit of time, it's not going to do much good for downtown businesses. So I mean, this stuff, people get this, right? I mean, this isn't somebody who works in my firm or anything like that. Never met the guy. And really, the question comes down to, do we want the downtown to be revitalized? And if so, where do we want to make the parking cheaper? Do we want it to be cheaper downtown, or do we want it to be cheaper at the big box malls? I think the answer is pretty obvious, right? And you can do it. You can employ something called a parking stall levy, where you charge for parking wherever it takes place in the city. So instead of charging for parking downtown and having it be free in the big boxes, why not charge for it everywhere? Have a level playing field. And is parking really free? Anyways, there's my bad little emoticon again, having a good laugh about that. Parking isn't really free, and there's a great book by a guy named Donald Shoup called The High Cost of Free Parking. And if you don't want to buy the book, of course, you can look it up online too. So when it comes to actually doing this, people are going to say, well, there's political considerations, there's economic considerations, and of course there are. And the first one that I want to look at, just because she's so old and so cute, is Hazel McCallion. She's the mayor of Mississauga, has been mayor maybe since I was born. Last spring, she was saying, let's get ready for road tolls in the Greater Toronto Area. Now, she's not a dumb woman politically, okay? And this fall, she went through an election and won I think her 12th win as mayor. So, and she's 91, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. So, you know, these things are coming. Let's be a bit realistic about it. They are coming. In the GTA, they've kind of acknowledged that that's the way they're going. John Tory, former leader of the Conservatives there, is a big supporter of road tolls. The Toronto Board of Trade is a supporter of road tolls. I mean, this stuff is coming. And there's the OECD again, pointing out that Canada is a bit of a laggard when it comes to environmental pricing reform, and urging us to sort of get on with it the way other countries are doing. And there's an example of it being done municipally. Montreal is creating a new tax on vehicle registrations, going to put the money into transit. The mayor saying, we just can't afford to keep paying for stuff with property taxes. We've got to develop some new revenue streams. Again, when you want to introduce some sort of policy innovation like environmental pricing reform, there are going to be questions about how you go about it. First of all, is it complex? Yes, of course, and that's why you do a good job of it. You do it carefully, you do it right, you involve the public, you do a thoughtful consultation the way has been done with the way we green. But just because it's complex doesn't mean that you walk away from it. Are there concerns about equity and fairness? Would a vehicle charge or a road use charge disproportionately hurt low-income people? If you do it poorly, yes. So you don't do it poorly, you do it smart. You design the whole package, the whole revenue and spending package, so that you protect low-income people. Maybe if you're taking in extra revenues, maybe you spend them in areas that are going to benefit those people.